What really happened to Lisa Kennedy Montgomery from Fox News after she disappeared from your screen? One day she was there. Sharp, fearless, funny, and impossible to ignore. Then slowly, she started fading. No farewell speech. No dramatic exit. No announcement. Just a gradual disappearance from the daily lineup that left loyal viewers wondering what they had missed. Kennedy Montgomery built a career on blunt honesty and refusing to play by anyone else's rules. So when she quietly stepped back from the spotlight, people noticed. And the real story behind her exit involves a canceled show, a secret divorce, an unexpected engagement, and a complete reinvention that nobody saw coming. If you thought you knew what happened to Kennedy, you don't have the full picture yet. Lisa Kennedy Montgomery was never someone who blended into the background. Long before she became one of cable television's most recognizable political voices, she was the girl from Oregon who talked her way into a Los Angeles radio station, fell in love with alternative music, and eventually landed in front of the cameras as one of the most distinctive personalities of the MTV generation. Born in 1972, Kennedy started building her media identity early, gaining experience as a disc jockey at an influential Los Angeles radio station. This background put her directly in contact with the emerging alternative music scene of the early 90s. That combination of sharp instincts, cultural knowledge, and an unmistakable personality made her a natural fit when television came calling. In 1992, she was selected to host a late-night music program on one of the most powerful music television networks in the world. The show focused on alternative rock and featured the biggest names of the era, bands that defined a generation. Kennedy was the face of that program from its debut until its end in 1997, becoming one of the network's most recognizable personalities. Her on-air presence was bold and irreverent. She mixed spontaneous commentary with a kind of punk rock attitude that echoed the music she was celebrating. Unlike traditional hosts who simply introduced videos, Kennedy brought a conversational, personality-driven style that connected with a generation hungry for authenticity. She often blended humor, skepticism, and sharp cultural observations, making her segments feel like candid conversations rather than scripted programming. But MTV was just the beginning. When the music television era shifted and the cultural landscape changed, Kennedy didn't disappear. She reinvented herself entirely. She moved from music culture into political commentary, building a new audience with the same fearless energy that had made her stand out on television a decade earlier. She launched a solo show on a major cable news business network in 2015. And for 8 years, she hosted a program that carved out a unique niche in the crowded cable news space. She combined political analysis, cultural commentary, and a libertarian perspective that refused to neatly align with either major political party. Her show was sharp, funny, and unpredictable. And audiences who found it became fiercely loyal. So what happened? Why did she start disappearing from screens that had featured her face for nearly 3 decades? The answer involves multiple chapters unfolding at once, professional shifts, personal upheaval, and a quiet rebuilding that the cameras mostly missed. The show's cancellation came in June 2023 after an 8-year run. The decision by the network was part of a broader programming adjustment driven by changing viewer habits and ratings pressures. According to the official announcement, the final episode aired on June 1st, 2023, after which the network replaced her time slot with additional airings of another program that had been consistently performing at much higher viewership numbers. Kennedy's farewell was deeply personal, especially since she had been hosting the show for so long. On her final broadcast, several colleagues joined her on stage to mark the end of the run. She expressed gratitude in a lighthearted and sincere tone, reflecting on the journey from the show's launch to that final episode and celebrating the team that had worked alongside her for years. But cancellation wasn't retirement. Kennedy made that very clear immediately. She remained a frequent contributor on panel programs at the same network, maintaining her voice and her visibility even without a solo show to anchor her daily presence. She continued showing up, continuing to argue, continuing to challenge conventional wisdom on both sides of the political aisle. If this story about Kennedy touches your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And here's where the personal story gets more complicated. Because while the professional changes were playing out publicly, something significant had already happened in Kennedy's private life that she'd kept almost entirely off camera. Kennedy had married a former professional snowboarder in May of 2000, and together they built a family that she largely protected from public scrutiny. They had 2 daughters, and by all appearances from the outside, they seemed to maintain a stable private life while Kennedy's public career continued to expand. But after 17 years of marriage, the relationship ended. Kennedy and her husband divorced in 2017. She confirmed this herself in a social media comment years after it happened, revealing the divorce only after people noticed she was no longer wearing her wedding ring. The split was handled quietly, without the kind of sensational public drama that often accompanies celebrity divorces. Both continued to co-parent their daughters with a collaborative approach focused on stability and the girls' well-being. What was striking about how Kennedy handled this chapter was entirely consistent with who she has always been. Private when it counts. Protective of the people she loves. And unwilling to perform grief or vulnerability for public consumption. She didn't sell the story. She didn't give exclusives. She just kept moving forward. And then in December 2025, she surprised everyone. On a live broadcast, at the close of a show she had been appearing on as a contributor, producers rolled a photograph of Kennedy smiling with a man identified only as Fred. The engagement announcement was unannounced, unexpected, and completely caught her co-hosts off guard. One colleague on the panel reacted emotionally on air, saying she was moved to tears when she first heard the news and describing the man as wonderful. Kennedy spoke briefly but warmly about how the relationship began. She met Fred unexpectedly, completely out of the blue, in an elevator. He proposed to her after a holiday party. She even admitted to sneaking him into the party without notifying security, which is exactly the kind of detail that made audiences fall in love with her in the first place. The public response was warm and enthusiastic, with fans expressing genuine happiness for someone who had navigated personal loss with so much quiet dignity. Meanwhile, the professional reinvention continued. After the cancellation of her solo show, Kennedy expanded into written commentary by joining one of the world's largest digital news platforms as a columnist. The announcement came in March 2024, with editors highlighting her sharp intellect, fierce independence, and darkly funny perspective as the qualities that made her a natural fit for their readership. The move was significant. After 2 decades building her reputation in American television and broadcasting, she was extending her reach internationally through the written word. Her columns continue to carry the same voice that made her stand out on screen. Contrarian, principled, and willing to challenge narratives that she believes deserve challenging regardless of which side they're coming from. She also took her podcast to a daily format after the television show ended, using it to continue the conversation she had been having on air for years. The transition from television host to multi-platform commentator wasn't a downgrade. For Kennedy, it was an expansion. To understand why Kennedy's political voice has always been distinctive, you have to understand her ideological journey. She didn't start where she ended up. As a young woman, she identified as a Republican and was politically engaged enough to speak at a major national convention in 1996. But over time, she became disillusioned with the party's approach to social issues and what she saw as an appetite for government intervention that conflicted with her deepening belief in individual liberty. She moved toward libertarianism, a philosophy centered on personal freedom, limited government, and skepticism of both major political parties when they reach for more power than she believes they should have. She is currently registered as unaffiliated, which reflects her genuine independence rather than a strategic branding choice. On economic issues, she champions free markets and individual choice, arguing against regulations and programs she believes create dependency rather than opportunity. On social issues, she consistently defends personal freedom, supporting same-sex marriage and opposing what she describes as the state imposing moral judgments on individual choices. She has been an outspoken critic of drug criminalization, arguing that treating personal use as a criminal matter represents government overreach that worsens the very problems it claims to address. This ideological consistency, even when it puts her at odds with the political environment of a network that skews in a particular direction, is part of what makes Kennedy an unusual figure. On-air disagreements have been a regular feature of her appearances. She challenged a former New York City mayor live on her show when she compared his claims to discredited information. He demanded an apology and accused her of bias. She didn't apologize. In 2025, she publicly criticized military actions she believed risked civilian casualties, putting her in direct conflict with colleagues on the same panel who held more hawkish views. She made her argument and stood by it. This pattern, challenging powerful figures and accepted narratives, even at the cost of comfortable relationships, is the through line that connects her MTV years to her cable news years to where she is now. And beneath all of it, there's a personal life that reflects genuine depth. Kennedy has competed in triathlons, training through swimming, cycling, and running alongside a media career and family responsibilities. She pursued fitness with intensity, partly because her mother was diagnosed with lymphoma, and the fear of following that path turned physical discipline into something personal and urgent.